Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to DreamWorks Switch to Life. And in today's video, we are going to be reviewing the final movie as of right now in the Jurassic franchise, as well as the last movie of the World Trilogy. That, of course, is Jurassic World Dominion. More specifically, we'll be talking about the extended version of the movie, the actual version of the movie. Yeah, apparently when it was getting a theatrical run, unfortunately, Universal wanted a shorter runtime so they could get more showings in per day and thus make more money. So instead of the 2-hour and 40-minute version of the film that Colin Trevorrow made, he had to shorten it down to less than 2 hours and 30 minutes, including credits. So yeah, we got a theatrical version and the actual version, the extended edition, which again, if you ask me, is by far the most superior version of the movie because you get 14 minutes worth of extra scenes that were cut from the original and thus didn't provide that necessary story detail or side plot. And well, we got that, which I'm really happy about. So without further ado, let's dive into the review. First off, the CGI cinematography, that was really awesome. I especially loved the Malta sequence where we got the Atrociraptors chasing them around. That was really cool. Unfortunately, I do have one complaint. They kind of wanted to bring back animatronic dinosaurs into this, and while it was really cool and awesome back when they were making Jurassic Park, nowadays, thanks to the CGI dinosaurs, it just makes the more realistic looking animatronic dinosaurs have stiffy movements, so they don't actually behave like real dinosaurs, and that just ruins the illusion, so there's that. Oh, there is one good thing about this movie with dinosaurs, and that's the sheer amount of dinosaur species. There are over 30 dinosaurs in this movie alone, which is way more than the 6 species that appeared in the first Jurassic Park movie, and even double the amount that appeared in Fallen Kingdom. But again, the dinosaurs look good, aside from when they move. Again, that's just the animatronics. The CGI dinosaurs are simply phenomenal. And then, of course, there's the cinematography, which I really loved. And then we have to dive into the actors. I really loved everyone in this movie. Although I'm a little disappointed that they had to replace Lewis Dodson from the original Jurassic Park movie, but it makes sense because his original actor did some things. So let's move on. Obviously, I am a big fan of the fact that they got everyone together from the previous 6 movies, and all of the actors brought their A game. Man, I really loved the return of the original 3 from the first Jurassic Park trilogy, and then, of course, it still continues the story of the Jurassic World trilogy with Owen, Claire, and now Maisie Lockwood. Now, first off, we gotta talk about the story of Dominion, which I both liked and hated. And it seems like a lot of people actually hated it. Because unlike other Jurassic World movies, this one didn't really focus on the dinosaurs. I know, crazy. A Jurassic movie that doesn't focus on the dinosaurs. Instead, it focused on giant prehistoric bugs called locusts that were brought back to life, and, well, now there's like a corporate conspiracy with Biosyn that the old team of the Park trilogy is trying to uncover, while at the same time, they end up kidnapping Maisie, so the new Jurassic World team is trying to rescue her, and eventually the two teams collide. I think what really turned a lot of people away is the fact that Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom left off on a giant cliffhanger where dinosaurs are now living in our modern day society, and in this movie, we don't see them interacting at all with modern day society. Yeah, instead we'd see like an underground market, but in terms of normal average civilian life, dinosaurs aren't there. And hey, if you really want, you can actually check out the TV show Jurassic World Chaos Theory, which actually does dive into that concept quite a bit over the course of its 3 seasons that have come out so far. Although I recommend holding off on it because season 3 actually crosses over with Dominion, and the same thing will happen with season 4. So if you haven't seen Dominion, one, do not watch Chaos Theory Seasons 3 and 4. But yeah, the story, while really good for bringing characters together, is quite underwhelming when it comes to the dinosaur action, which is very disappointing. And of course, I really hate to say this, but the story is disappointing for another reason. Now, we're gonna dive into spoilers here, and they're very heavy spoilers, so click off the video if you don't want them, and you should probably go watch Jurassic World Dominion. Make sure it's the extended edition, because the theatrical version is not that great. But over the course of the movie, no one dies. I mean, yes, some civilians die. Obviously, the bad guy, Lewis Dodson, dies. But aside from that, nobody actually dies. I mean, yes, there are a couple of civilians, and obviously our main villain, Lewis Dodson, ends up dying. But unfortunately, nobody important actually dies. No one, which is very disappointing. I was hoping that we get like a self-sacrifice moment, but it never happened. And then, of course, there's the other big bad of the movie, the Giganotosaurus. Before the movie, he was painted as someone who just wants to watch the world burn. A dinosaur with monstrous tendencies. But in this movie, he's just a normal, generic animal, or at least he behaves that way. Yes, he's still a dinosaur, very big, scary, but again, just a dinosaur being a dinosaur. He's not like the hybrid dinosaurs of the first two Jurassic World movies where they actually want to kill everything in sight. This guy is just a dinosaur, so it's really underwhelming, but now it's time to dive into the actual story. So first, we get a prologue short film, which was released for free online, and it was not included in the theatrical cut, but in the extended edition, it actually starts off the movie. So first, dinosaurs are living 65 million years ago, and we see a battle between a Giganotosaurus and a T-Rex, and the T-Rex dies. Then, 65 million years later, we see Rexy the T-Rex, a clone of that original T-Rex, actually running for her life away from the Department of Wildlife. She causes some ruckus at a screening for a movie, but then eventually the movie actually starts with a news report basically talking about how dinosaurs are living in our world today. And what I really loved is that the government has decided to form its own agency to catching and relocating the dinosaurs. That, of course, being the Department of Prehistoric Wildlife. Unfortunately, if you've seen Jurassic World Chaos Theory, you will know that just a couple of months before this movie actually starts, the Department of Prehistoric Wildlife was disbanded because of some corporate corruption as well as some illegal dinosaur smuggling. So until they can get the DPW back up and running, they replace it with the DFW, meaning Department of Fish and Wildlife. Yeah, it's a little weird, but okay. And then we are reintroduced to Claire, who was working with Franklin Webb and Zia Rodriguez to sneak into a warehouse where they're keeping smuggled dinosaurs. And honestly, it would not surprise me if this warehouse was actually part of the DPW back when it was doing smuggling operations. Anyway, Claire decides to put the team in danger by grabbing a sick dinosaur who probably won't make it for when they contact the authorities and lead them to the warehouse. So they take the sick dinosaur, get it to a hospital so it can recover, but in the process they put the entire team in danger, and thus Franklin and Zia say goodbye to Claire and they're not going to work with her anymore. And they complain that the only reason that Claire is doing this is because she feels guilty for how she treated the dinosaurs back when she was running Jurassic World. And well, maybe they're right. But anyway, we meet up with Owen, who, while not an official part of the DFW, is actually working with them to wrangle a herd of Parasaurolophus so that they can be relocated to a safe place. And that's when we meet a bounty hunter who calls himself Rain Delacour, and he supposedly works for the DFW, but it turns out to just be a scam so that he can get the Parasaurolophus and then smuggle it to a new location. And he's also trying to follow Owen so that he can track down Owen's daughter, Maisie Lockwood. yeah, it turns out that while Owen and Claire never actually got married, at least not yet, they kind of adopted Maisie, and now they're hiding out in the middle of nowhere to protect her from society, as she is a human clone and thus a scientific breakthrough, so everybody into genetics is hunting her down. But anyway, in the theatrical version, all we see is a glimpse of Rain Delacour. In the extended version, we get a conversation with Rain Delacour, and, well, he threatens Owen's life if he doesn't hand over the Parasaurolophus. And then he says, I'm sure you got some family who would be very disappointed if you're gone. So, well, Owen hands over the Parasaurolophus, so it's a smuggled dinosaur now. And at the same time, Rain Delacour is still on the hunt for Maisie Lockwood. Meanwhile, Maisie, being a teenager right about now, since it's been 4 years since Fallen Kingdom, she is trying to figure out who she is. I mean, every teenager goes through with this, but what's unique about her is that since she's a clone, she's already had a life, and she wants to know her ancestry. Who was Charlotte Lockwood? Ben Lockwood's daughter, who Ben decided to clone so that he could have a daughter when Charlotte died. So this means that Maisie is growing a bit distant and going out on her own despite Claire and Owen's warnings. And then we get this cool scene where Owen is trying to teach Maisie some knife skills, and you think that it would come up later in the movie, but it never does, which is kind of disappointing. But anyway, we also find out that Blue is also living in a nearby woods, so I'm glad that Blue decided to not really leave Owen, just stay out of vision of him. And then we learn that Blue actually had a baby, and no, there was no father. Blue had the baby asexually, which means it was on her own, and Beta is identical to Blue in almost every way, just young. So eventually Beta goes off exploring and runs into Maisie, and then they have a run-in with Blue, and, well, stuff happens, but then we move on, and it turns out that Blue is caught in a trap, and Beta is captured by Rain Delacour. Another trap is laid for Maisie, so both Maisie and Beta are captured. Blue confronts Owen about this and even goes so far as to slash his hand, but Owen promises to bring Beta back to Blue, and, well, because of their relationship, I'm pretty sure that Blue actually trusts Owen. She just wants to give him a warning that if you don't, I will kill you. So Claire and Owen reach out to their friend Franklin Webb from Fallen Kingdom, who reaches out to another of Owen's friends working in French intelligence, Barry Simbeni, and they reveal that Maisie has been taken to Malta, where they discover a dinosaur black market where dinosaurs are forced to fight. They're being smuggled and sold, and it's just crazy what goes on in the Malta sequence. Then Beta and Maisie are brought to Sayona Santos, who actually hired Rain Delacour to kidnap them so that she could ship them off to Biosyn Genetics. And, well, there's a not-so-innocent bystander named Kayla Watts, who is also part of the dinosaur smuggling business, but she watches Maisie being shipped off and is a little concerned about that. And then when Claire asks her about if she saw a little girl named Maisie, she just warns Claire, get out of here while you still can, because this is not the kind of place where you will be safe. And then Owen, Claire, and Barry all show up in Malta, and then while Claire and Owen are trying to find Maisie, they run into Rain Delacour, who is getting a new job from Sayona Santos to deliver some Atrociraptors that she's trying to sell. And, well, Owen interrogates Rain Delacour by fighting with him, and then eventually they end up in a dinosaur fighting pit, where eventually Owen knocks Rain Delacour into the ground, and then a juvenile Carnotaurus starts eating his right arm, while a full-grown Lystrosaurus eats his left arm. And so Owen continues the interview and demands answers for where Maisie is, and Rain Delacour says that he just handed her off to Santos and doesn't know anything aside from that. And then it's at this point that a juvenile Baryonyx escapes and ends up eating the head of Rain Delacour, killing him. Okay, maybe I lied about there not being that many iconic deaths, but again, this is just a bad guy, not really one of our good guy characters, so there's no high stakes in this movie. So after getting that information, working with Barry, they manage to track down Sayona Santos, who, being cornered, opens up the cages and unleashes the Atrociraptor squad, which is a complete opposite of the Velociraptor squad from the first Jurassic World movie, which I really loved. You got Red, who, despite being the smartest of the group and a complete opposite of Blue, she's actually not the leader. Ghost is. You also have Tiger and Panthera, and all four of them work together to kill all of the guys that are working with French intelligence, and then Owen and Barry are left to defend themselves against the Atrociraptor squad. Well, thanks to their experience working and training velociraptors, they do this trick where they lure the velociraptor, now Atrociraptor, to a cage, and then they dive out of the way at the last second, making the Atrociraptor hurl itself into the cage with momentum. Then, while all of that is happening, Sayona is trying to escape, but she's confronted by Claire Deering, who tries to get an answer out of her, and eventually discovers that Maisie is being shipped off to Biosyn, along with Beta. And that's when Sayona uses her laser pointer tracking device on her bracelet, which the actress actually designed herself, and she points it at Claire, making it so that one of the Atrociraptors starts chasing Claire across the city. Luckily, she's rescued by Kayla Watts, who decided to actually have a change of heart and help out in something that wasn't just dinosaur smuggling, but human trafficking as well. So they make a plan to go to Kayla Watts' plane, at which point they contact Owen using an earpiece, and Owen at this point in time is actually working with Barry to arrest Sayona Santos, who for some reason decided to go back and check on them, which is a little bit weird. And then while Owen is leaving so that Barry can arrest Sayona, Sayona sneakily points her laser pointer at Owen, marking him for death, and thus another Atrociraptor actually chases after him. And across the city we get a really cool Malta chase sequence where some innocent people die because of some dinosaurs that are breaking out, and the Atrociraptors are still chasing exclusively Owen and Claire, which you gotta really love the dedication of the Atrociraptors. Now, there is one thing I want to mention about the civilians who die. One of them is a guy on a scooter, and, well, this guy was actually just a normal person who actually, in real life, won a marketing contest where Universal agreed to let one person be eaten on screen by a dinosaur. And, well, he was that guy, and that's really fun. Anyway, Kayla and Claire make it to their plane, at which point they start it up, and Owen has to drive his motorcycle onto the moving plane while at the same time avoiding the last Atrociraptor, Ghost. Well, Ghost manages to make his way onto the plane, but unfortunately, the weight of the motorcycle as the plane takes off hits Ghost, causing both motorcycle and Ghost to fall into the ocean. And so, Claire, Owen, and Kayla all make their way over to Biosyn Valley, where they can rescue Maisie and Beta, while at the same time, there is a mystery to be solved. Yeah, we're gonna rewind the movie an hour and 30 minutes, and now we're gonna talk about the other side of the story, the Park trilogy characters. So, in the theatrical version, this scene is completely skipped, but first, we meet Ellie Sattler, who rushes over to a farm where they manage to capture a giant prehistoric locust made by Biosyn Genetics. Now, nobody actually knows that these locusts are made by Biosyn, they just happen to have a hunch. See, the locusts were made so that they could spread this pathogen to a bunch of plants and make it so that they don't die from diseases, or at least as many diseases. But unfortunately, since the locusts still need to eat, and I mean, there's a lot of them because they multiply like crazy, they're eating literally all of the crops that they're supposed to spread the pathogen to. And that's when it's revealed that the one crop that they aren't eating is Biosyn seeds. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the locusts are made by Biosyn if they're not eating the Biosyn seeds. So, Ellie takes this live locust to Dr. Alan Grant, who is still digging up fossils, a loyal paleontologist, and what I really love is how he expresses his still valid point. These dinosaurs that are still living amongst us now in our everyday lives, They're just monsters, at least in his eyes. He's still doing his paleontology work because he believes that real dinosaurs lived in the past and you can only learn about them from fossils. That is where the truth about dinosaurs can be found, not these genetic animals that have been made. And so Ellie ends up talking to Alan about the locust, and then she says that she needs everything, like a DNA sample both from this locust and one from Biosyn. Like, she has to go to the Biosyn facility and get the DNA of a locust. And she also needs an eyewitness, so she recruits Alan. And what I really love is that even after all this time, almost 30 years since Jurassic Park, Alan and Ellie are still having feelings for each other. Of course, Ellie moved on because Alan didn't want to have kids, so she married another man, she had kids, now those kids are in college, and she's free to be herself. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that her husband had a divorce with her. Either way, he's no longer in her life, which is, again, freeing for her, and it means that now she can actually be with Alan, and Alan is still a little hesitant because he doesn't want to hurt their friendship or anything, but because of his devotion to her, he agrees to go with her to Biosyn, and thus, that's exactly what they do. And they have a way inside thanks to Ian Malcolm, who is actually working for Biosyn, giving kind of TED Talks or something. Now, he's talking a lot about chaos theory and how there's no way you can control things, but he's also trying to paint Biosyn in a good light, but that's only revealed that he's doing it so he can keep the job. The reason? He's an undercover spy trying to uncover the conspiracy theory of the locust. But since he's an employee there, he can't actually do it himself, so he asks Ellie and Alan to do it for him. And that's exactly what happens. They sneak in and they manage to get the DNA sample from a locust, with Alan being an eyewitness. And now we need to go back in time a little bit further to talk about Maisie Lockwood. So after being shipped to Malta, she was shipped off to Biosyn, and she meets Dr. Henry Wu, who was actually the creator of the locust when he was recruited by Lewis Dodson, the CEO of Biosyn Genetics, and he reveals the actual truth behind Charlotte Lockwood. Turns out, Charlotte didn't die in a car accident like everybody thought she did. Ben Lockwood didn't create her. Instead, she was actually born asexually, just like Beta. Yeah, having cloning technology, Charlotte decided to make a kid version of herself. She got pregnant with Maisie, but unfortunately, Charlotte discovered that she had a terrible disease that would kill her at a very young age. So Charlotte experimented on Maisie and made it so that she wouldn't get this disease when she grew up. So Maisie is immune to this disease, and Charlotte unfortunately died from it when Maisie was just a wee baby. And so Ben Lockwood took her in and lied to pretty much everybody about how Charlotte actually created Maisie, because if that was the case, then, well, genetic power would be way more powerful than it needed to be. But if Ben just lied and said that he created a clone of his dead daughter, then no one would actually bat an eye, though they would critique him about it. Honestly, this is a retcon that I absolutely love, but then we need to mention why she was kidnapped in the first place. Because Charlotte experimented on Maisie and actually used a pathogen to change her genetic makeup, Dr. Henry Wu wants to find this pathogen so that he can use it to alter the locust DNA and make it so that they don't eat everything in sight and thus bring the world into chaos and starvation. It's also why he kidnapped Beta, the velociraptor, because both Maisie and Beta were produced asexually. But since Beta is a 100% match and doesn't have the pathogen, he can study both of them to find the pathogen in Maisie. And once he understands Charlotte's science, he ends up creating the pathogen, which we'll talk about later. But then Maisie escapes and thus triggers the alarm, which at this point in time, Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler are collecting DNA samples from the locusts, and well, the alarm sets them off so that they start swarming and attacking seeking them, and they have to escape. And when they do, they actually run into Maisie Lockwood, and they decide to help her escape from Biosyn. And that's when they run into Ramsey Cole, who is an employee who works at Biosyn. And at first they think that they're caught until Ramsey asks, "Did you get the DNA sample?" And that's when it's revealed that Ramsey is actually also trying to uncover the Biosyn locust plot. And he's actually the one who told Ian Malcolm, who told Ellie Sattler, who told Alan Grant. And thus Ramsey helps them escape through the train tube so that they can just move along and get out of the Biosyn sanctuary. And, well, eventually Lewis Dodson catches on to their plan, and he turns off the train, leaving them stranded in the middle of some underground caves where we actually meet a Dimetrodon. If you don't know, a Dimetrodon is not an actual dinosaur. Yeah, dinosaurs lived during the Mesozoic era, which includes Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. But Dimetrodons lived during the Permian period, which was actually 40 million years before the Triassic era, and 270 plus million years ago, which is super crazy, and I'm super happy that they included this. But anyway, they managed to find their way to the exit of the Dimetrodon cave, but unfortunately it's blocked off because of a gate. Meanwhile, Lewis Dodson realizes that they actually snuck into the genetics lab using Ian Malcolm's key card, which he gave to Ellie Sattler. And so he fires Ian, at which point Ian gives a speech about how Biosyn is evil and he made a mistake. And he apologizes for making it so people thought that since he's working for Biosyn, Biosyn is good. And, well, then he goes and he tries to find Ellie, Alan, and I guess Maisie, even though he doesn't know Maisie is there. And he finds the Dimetrodon cave, but he can't open the gate because he doesn't know the code. And Ramsey Cole sees this on the security camera, and he inputs the code on a computer. And so the gate opens, everybody is safe, and they get into Ian's Jeep and make their way back to the Biosyn Genetics base, which is a little bit weird because if you're trying to escape Biosyn, why would you go back to the main base? But while that's happening, Kayla Watts is flying the plane with Owen and Claire in it, at which point they try to land in the Biosyn Valley, but unfortunately, Biosyn didn't request Kayla Watts' services, and thus Sayona Santos, who surprisingly managed to escape Barry, though that's off-screen. But we hear from a worker that she called to report that Owen and Claire are on their way to rescue Maisie, and thus they turn off the air deterrents, sending the Quetzalcoatlus after Kayla Watts' plane. And eventually the plane crashes, and unfortunately, Kayla Watts only has one parachute, so before it does crash, she straps in Claire, and Owen and Claire say goodbye, and it's really cool because Owen says that if anyone needs to rescue Maisie, it's her mother. So Claire is shot out of the plane, and her parachute activates, making it so she lands in the middle of the forest, where she encounters a Therizinosaurus. And what I really love is that this Therizinosaurus is blind, and, well, it's just one of the tensest scenes ever. The Therizinosaurus has giant claws that can easily slash and kill, like we even see him yeet a deer. But being blind, the Therizinosaurus relies on hearing and smell, and Claire just has to silently move slowly away and hide under a lake, and it's just, oh, it's so good. But eventually the Therizinosaurus thinks that nothing is there, so he moves on. And then we also get a scene where a T-Rex and Giganotosaurus fight over the deer, and the Giganotosaurus wins and, becomes the apex predator. But the valley's big enough for both of them, so the T-Rex just moves along. And while that's happening, the plane has crash landed into a frozen lake where Owen and Kayla manage to climb their way out, and Kayla says Biosyn owes her a new plane. But then they're confronted by the Pyroraptor, which, fun fact, is the same Pyroraptor from Chaos Theory Season 3. And what I really love is that this Pyroraptor can actually dive into the frozen lake and swim super expertly, like way better than a human, so it's actually really scary. But eventually, both Kayla and Owen manage to get to safety. Meanwhile, Claire is confronted by a herd of Dilophosaurus, and she's going to die when Owen and Kayla actually show up at the last second and save her, and together they scare off the herd of Dilophosaurs. And while that's happening, Lewis Dodson is trying to cover up everything about the Locust Project, and he erases all of the digital data, shreds all the physical data, and he even tries to burn all of the remaining locusts in the facility. And, well, unfortunately, the locusts, in their desperation to get away from the fire, end up escaping the facility, and flaming locusts are unleashed across the entire Biosyn sanctuary, causing a massive panic attack, and even causing Ian and the rest of the gang to crash the Jeep. But luckily, the Jeep manages to crash land right next to Owen, Claire, and Kayla, who have a heartwarming reunion with Maisie, which is then ruined by the Giganotosaurus, who shows up and eats a locust, which sadly is the only thing that he kills, despite being the big bad dinosaur of the movie. But he attacks them, which causes most of the team to run away, and they try to get to safety, but in the process, Ian Malcolm decides to stay behind and hold a flaming locust on a stick, just like he did in the original Jurassic Park by using a flare to distract the T-Rex. So, really cool. And while that's happening, because of the emergency with the flaming locusts, all of the dinosaurs are being controlled with chips, which is actually a reference to Camp Cretaceous Season 5, if you don't know. And the dinosaurs are forced to walk outside of the valley and head towards the Biosyn Genetics lab so that they can be safe from the forest fire created by the flaming locust invasion. And another part of the emergency protocols is that the CEO, Lewis Dodson, is trying to gather as much resources as possible so that he can escape through the train tube. And what I really love is that he grabs the Barbasol can from the original Jurassic Park, which at this point in time would be rendered useless because, well, that can was left on Isla Nublar all the way until 2016 when Lewis Dodson found it in Camp Cretaceous Season 5, which I'm glad that we get to see how he found it. And in this movie, he grabs it for some strange, inexplicable reason. And then he has a talk with Ramsey Cole about how the world is complicated and messy. And even though you're young and you want to do what's right, well, stuff happens that you can't control. And that's when he finally figures out that Ramsey was the one who in charge of leaking the locust plot. And so he fires Ramsey and he makes his way to the train tube where, unfortunately, he is killed off by a bunch of Dilophosauruses, which, if you don't know, are the same dinosaurs that killed Dennis Nedry, the one who collected that same Barbasol can in the original Jurassic Park. That's a very ironic death right there. But anyway, Ramsey shows up to help the team, who at this point have just escaped the wrath of the Giganotosaurus and are having a moment to cool down and get acquainted with one another. And they make a plan where, because all of the dinosaurs are flocking to the main part of the valley where they need to get a helicopter so that they can land it there, the team actually splits up, with Owen, Alan, and Maisie all going to find Beta, the Velociraptor, after Maisie used her as a distraction so she could escape. They find Beta and manage to knock her out with a tranquilizer gun, and what I really love is that we finally get to understand what is going on behind the hand gesture thing. Sure, in How to Train Your Dragon, it's a way to say, I'm being calm and peaceful to you, and if you will accept me, I will be your friend. But in Jurassic World, it's revealed that it's because you're trying to make yourself look big and intimidating like a velociraptor, while at the same time showing comfort. But yeah, they trank Beta and then they pack her up. While that's going on, Claire and Ellie are working together to make it through a swarm of locusts so that they can actually turn on the air deterrent system and make it so that when they land a helicopter there, which Kayla Watts is trying to steal, they can land the helicopter in the Biosyn Valley and escape. But what I really love is that Ian Malcolm is there in their ear trying to give them a bunch of instructions, and he's not being very helpful because even though he's looking at the schematics, he's not given very good instructions, which is a lot like John Hammond did back in the original Jurassic Park and then Ian Malcolm took over and gave actual useful instructions. Here, though, Ian is being a lot less helpful, and eventually at the end, he gives them really good instructions. And then they manage to turn on the air deterrent system, so Kayla Watts can now land the helicopter in the valley. And so the team makes their way to the helicopter, at which point they run into Dr. Henry Wu, who begs them to let him go with them. And he says that he is the only one who can stop the locust invasion and stop the planet from dying of starvation. And, well, Maisie actually says, I trust him because he was very kind to me back when he was studying her. And so they reluctantly agree to let him join, but at that moment, there's a scene where the Giganotosaurus and Tyrannosaurus and Therizinosaurus all show up at the same time, and we get a three-way battle, which is actually nowhere near as cool as the Jurassic World battle in the fourth movie. Though one thing I really love is when Rexy shows up, she does it in front of this giant circle statue, which ends up creating the Jurassic Park logo, which is really awesome. But unfortunately, the Giganotosaurus ends up almost killing Rexy and making her pass out. And when Rexy does pass out, she has a bunch of flashbacks to her ancestor back from 65 million years ago during the prologue of this movie, which I found to be pretty cool. But again, that's something that's only in the extended version, not the theatrical version. So after getting that flashback and trying to honor her ancestors, Rexy gets right back up and shoves the Giganotosaurus into the claws of the blind Therizinosaurus. And I don't really understand how the Therizinosaurus knew to hold up its claws, but it worked. You know, I really hate how Rexy won the battle in this case because, well, Rexy is a super old T-Rex. She has been around for 29 years since Jurassic Park, and before that, she obviously had to be born, most likely back in the 1980s. So she's definitely more than 30 years old. She is really old, and that means that her time needs to come to an end soon. And honestly, I think it would have been so much better if she was killed off by the Giganotosaurus rather than her winning and then later she just dies off screen, which I'm pretty sure is what's going to happen to her, so yeah. Oh, and also, if the Giganotosaurus did kill Rexy, that would have just made him an even bigger threat rather than just the animal who kills a single locust and that's it. Then our team manages to outmaneuver this dinosaur battle that's going on and make their way to the helicopter, at which point they fly off to safety. And thus, we get a bunch of nice endings for our many characters. Ellie and Alan have started dating again, and now Ellie, Alan, and Ian are all being vocal and respected about their opinions on dinosaurs, which is very cool. Then, of course, we also have Claire and Owen, who return with Beta and Maisie to their home, and Beta reunites with her mother. And thus, we get one final scene of Blue saying goodbye to Owen. And this time I feel like it's forever because this is the final movie of the Jurassic World trilogy. Now, personally, I would love it if Blue and Beta managed to show up in another movie sometime later down the line, but honestly, I don't think it's going to happen, especially because Chris Pratt has said he's going to retire from playing Owen in the Jurassic series. I mean, never say never, but yeah, I feel like this is a fitting end to most of the characters. Anyway, Kayla manages to get a new plane for herself. Dr. Wu manages to find the pathogen in Maisie's blood, at which point he makes it a little bit different. Then he gives it to a locust, who gives it to the rest of the locusts, and make it so that they die off quickly, and at the same time, save the world's food supply from being eaten by the army of locusts that was causing the world to go to starvation. So, you know, ending a global pandemic, which is funny because this film was actually filmed during a global pandemic. But what I really love is that even though Dr. Wu is portrayed as a hero in the eyes of the public, he attributes this scientific breakthrough to Charlotte Lockwood, a scientist who has been dead for almost 20 years. And I really love it because it's kind of like a redemption to his character. He's no longer just making dinosaurs, he's not making monsters. Now he's trying to make the world a better place using his scientific genius, and he actually understands how to do that now, which I really loved. And then there's one final character to talk about, and that's Ramsey Cole. He becomes the CEO of Biosyn Genetics, and he shuts down the genetics lab and turns Biosyn Valley into a sanctuary where dinosaurs can live out their lives peacefully. This was already happening, but now Biosyn is no longer creating dinosaurs anymore. Now they're just taking care of the dinosaurs and making it so they can live their lives away from humanity. And the film ends with a closing shot of Rexy meeting two other T-Rexes, and it's revealed that these Rexes are actually the buck and doe from Jurassic Park 2: The Lost World, which I found to be really cool. Though, I'm kind of surprised. What happened to Junior? Well, nobody really knows. My personal theory is that he actually grew up and changed his gender into a girl using frog DNA, and then he ended up becoming Big Edie from Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous Seasons 4 and 5, and thus the movie ends. And what I really love about this movie is, even though it's kind of lackluster with the story, especially the lack of deaths, it still set up a lot of potential sequels with so many characters. Ramsey and Kayla could show up in future movies, Sayona Santos could show up as a villain in a future movie, but what I really love is the world building. My personal favorite part is the Malta black market, and I'm certain that there are black markets like this all over the world where dinosaurs are being smuggled and shipped and forced into servitude, which I found to be really cool and definitely set up for a future storyline somewhere down the movie list. But honestly, the best part is that dinosaurs are now living amongst us in our everyday life. And while there aren't really a lot of scenes in this movie, which is kind of disappointing, now dinosaurs are everywhere in our world. So again, set up for great franchise potential. And while it is the end of the era and we say goodbye to a bunch of characters that we know and love, we say hello to a new era, starting with Jurassic World Rebirth, which is technically a reboot of the Jurassic franchise. Yeah, I see what they did with the title there. But with all of that in mind, what do you guys think of this movie? I have been here long enough, so feel free to leave your opinions down below in the comments section. Did you think this movie was good, or do you hate it compared to the rest of the franchise? Honestly, I'm kind of mixed myself. I don't know what to think, whether it's good or bad. I like it, but at the same time, it's just not great. It has a lot of flaws. So with all of that in mind, be sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comments section, and also make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel. And if you really want to support the channel, be sure to join my membership program by clicking the join button down below. But with all of that in mind, above all else, make sure that you're staying safe out there, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye bye.